General advice on communication assumes that somehow I'm some type of expert worthy of your ears for my advice. There's no way any one person and all the gurus that we have opportunities to listen to on communication and leadership. I've talked about the word leadership is very silly to me because I know I'll wind up having a completely different voice with different people at different times. I know this. I'm recognizing it as it's happening. And sometimes I'm biased on what I think I might know about the individual coming in, whether that's clinically or not, or combined. Versus sometimes you're just going to be, hey, you know what? I'm going to actually do what some of these goofballs on social media would say and how I'm going to try and communicate. Because it's really just taking risks. How are you going to get better at something is actually doing it. I don't always have an answer as to what I am doing before I do it. I don't think about it and then be like, okay, I'm going to do this outside of those situations of extreme bias. When I'm done, I'm like, yeah, I realized what I just did there. And I review not only my clinical notes, but how did I try to communicate to that individual? And then what's going to work? Where these are people that know what to do, but they're not doing it. So telling them that is like a double loss. They already know the information you're telling them, and they're already failing with said information. So if you try to find a different way to communicate that, AKA playing different characters that have a different voice, but in effect attempting to say the same thing, that's the variability that I think can be super, super useful. I've been in situations where because of all of the things that surrounded the interpersonal relationships, there was a Frankenstein monster of Gandhi, Jesus, and Mother Teresa weren't going to get to these people. I mean, it just wasn't going to happen. There was no one on earth. The only option would be to just let them do whatever, which I know is, that's what leadership is. Your job is to make other people, be able to accumulate more. So we could have a darling D+ program because the people that got hired weren't the same people that were commissioned to be their managers/leaders. And I didn't want to do that. And looking back, was there really a problem with how I communicated? No, I failed because I was communicating in a way that put this in a time frame that we just need to get these people out of here in 1 year when their contract is over. If I had taken a 5-year plan, I would have communicated much, much differently, and I would have had to accept a D+ for perhaps even longer than 1 year. So all of the surrounding factors of the atmosphere leads to the culture of which communication is just one small component. But the only way of being good at it is by trying it and then failing. And I now know if I'm in a situation like that where I am going to accept a role where I'm not in that situation, didn't even know that we weren't going to have the opportunity to actually interview people that are supposed to work for you. Unbelievable situation. And at least when I describe it that way, man, I was part of the problem because I didn't communicate and I used the correct characters and the correct voices for that situation because I didn't want to take the risk of having such a trash service model. But I lost. And even though the service model remains trash many, many years later in that particular situation, there's not even a program anymore. It fell apart because the whole thing was a disaster from the start. So you see how negative I am. Like, it's hard to take risks when you're already, you're not at the bottom, but you're very close. So you don't want it to get any worse. So you're going to do whatever you can to try to create a solution. That would not work with the gentleman that I was doing those text messages with. It wouldn't work. He already would have done it. I was thinking if I go back to that situation I'm referencing, they didn't know. So I thought there was a chance that I'm the one that you brought in here from across this country to do this. You guys just don't know. Well, they didn't really want to know. So yeah, there's a lot of different characters that you can play. How do you really know how the other person would respond? You start one way and you just let the waves take you to wherever the island might be, and that's the island of relevancy for your communication.